Who doesn't love a good disaster movie? The 90s were full of them, providing so much fun and chaos that we didn't know how good we had it till it was already gone. And it's crazy how much Roland Emmerich contributed to the genre. In fact, it's kinda got to the point where I kept asking myself, does this guy have a problem? Hey friends, Tyler Nichols with JoBlo, and thanks so much for joining me for some world-destroying shenanigans. First, we look at when Emmerich was blowing up all sorts of famous US landmarks. For me, this is genuinely a yearly July 4th watch, and the day just doesn't feel right unless I hear Bill Pullman proclaim,
"Today, we celebrate our Independence Day."
So let's see what happened with Independence Day. Then he was having a giant iguana? Is that what he is in this version? Well, let's watch as he takes on New York City as Matthew Broderick tells us about worms in Godzilla. And finally, he took on the Mayan calendar and gave us a look at an alternative world where only John Cusack can save us. Those Mayans just happen to be right about the apocalypse, with 2012. Sure, there was other stuff in between, but this man sure knew his disasters. Whether they be alien-made, the result of go-go Godzillas, or even something dictated by a Mayan calendar, the man just knew how to have fun. So let's take a look at some of his most fun ventures into the world of blowing up, well, the world. It seems very long ago, but there was a time when Roland Emmerich wasn't a household name. Today, the name is synonymous with the destruction of Earth, and always will be. But go back a few decades, and he was just another working director who made mid-budget movies that most people don't feel very passionate about. Making Contact? Moon 44? Okay, we'll give some love to 1992's Universal Soldier, only because it still sorta rocks. But I bet when you first saw it, you didn't think much about who made it. Same for the 1994 sci-fi flick Stargate, a title most of us still probably associate with the TV spin-offs than the actual movie. So during the beginning of 1996, when the movie of the summer looked to be an epic alien invasion spectacle called Independence Day, the legion of us who were excited were thinking, this looks awesome. And it was directed by who? So how did a 40-year-old director from Germany, whose most notable movies were Universal Soldier and Stargate, come to direct one of the biggest movies of all time? Well, kick the tires and light the fires, baby, because we're going to uncover just what the f*** happened to Independence Day.
I have got to get me one of these!
We actually do have Stargate to thank for planting the earliest seeds of Independence Day. While they were doing the press rounds for the movie in 1994, Emmerich and his co-producer Dean Devlin were constantly asked if they believed in aliens, since, of course, they were a major part of Stargate's plot. Emmerich's answer was usually no, surprisingly enough, but he admitted that he found the topic a fascinating one. In an offhand remark, he said something along the lines of, "Imagine if you woke up tomorrow and there were gigantic spaceships hovering over all of Earth's major cities." He then turned to Devlin and said he believed he just inadvertently came up with the plot for their next movie. From there, the two decided to embark on writing an epic-scale alien invasion movie, the likes of which hadn't been made in Hollywood in years. Both Emmerich and Devlin lamented that most alien invasion movies saw the evil intruders attack smaller locations, like a farm or a small town in a small-scale way, or inhabit human bodies in an attempt to replicate them. They hadn't seen a jumbo-sized alien attack, nor had they made what Emmerich would call a big entrance, announcing their arrival. The duo wrote the script for Independence Day in a little over 3 weeks, during a vacation to Mexico. Once completed, they sent the screenplay out to studios, and a bidding war ensued. 20th Century Fox ended up on top, offering the filmmaking team $7.5 million, plus a percentage of the profits. The movie was immediately greenlit after they accepted the offer, and pre-production quickly ramped up. Stargate had been an under-the-radar hit, grossing almost $200 million off of a $55 million budget. But for their much bigger movie, Emmerich and Devlin were only given a budget of around $71 million, which doesn't sound too bad, of course, but not the massive sum that it might seem in 1996, when budgets reaching $100 million were becoming more and more common. It was Emmerich's first time working for a studio as well. Stargate was made outside the studio system and bought by MGM, which eventually tinkered with the film a lot, much to the director's chagrin. Now he was beholden to executives from the get-go, which threatened to be a headache for him. According to Emmerich, many of the film's roles were written with specific actors in mind, such as Bill Pullman as the president, Mary McDonnell as his wife, and Jeff Goldblum as a tech nerd who helps save the world.
They're communicating with a hidden signal. They're going to attack.
The role of Stephen Hiller, a fighter pilot who is ostensibly the lead of the film, was supposedly written with an African American in mind, but no specific actor. At one point, the role was offered to Ethan Hawke, who read the script and, thinking it was laughable, turned it down, only to regret it later.
Wait till I get another plane! I'm lining all your friends up right beside you!
Will Smith, right off of Fresh Prince and Bad Boys, nabbed the role, which ended up being a huge boost to his career. Though initially the studio didn't want him because he was an unproven commodity overseas, even at one point telling Emmerich that a black man in the lead would not be good for foreign sales. Emmerich won that battle, obviously. The role of Jimmy Wilder, Stephen Hiller's wisecracking buddy and surefire first-to-die candidate, was originally handed to Friends star Matthew Perry, but Perry dropped out right before shooting began, leading Emmerich to find an unorthodox replacement in the form of crooner Harry Connick Jr., who proved to be just as adept at improv as Perry.
You need to kiss some serious booty to get ahead in this world, man. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
While the alien panic movies of the 1950s certainly come to mind while watching ID4, it was the Irwin Allen disaster films of the 70s that truly inspired Emmerich and Devlin. Those movies were ensemble pieces featuring a dozen or so main characters, all of them trying to survive some massive threat, who have to come together in order to vanquish whatever terrible thing is threatening their lives. Hence, the filmmakers were secure in not needing an A-lister at the front of the movie. They figured a solid cast would carry the entire film. Well, them and the alien attacks on the cities themselves. According to Emmerich, the movie was always supposed to be titled Independence Day, but there was a problem. Warner Brothers owned the rights to that title, not Fox. And not willing to budge for fear that Fox would rename their movie something generic and uninspiring, Doomsday apparently being one possibility, Emmerich and Devlin wrote the big "Today we celebrate our Independence Day" speech that opens the third act because they knew the studio would have no choice but to acquire the title. Because how could you not call it Independence Day after that? On the same page, the film would also certainly have to open on July 4th weekend around the globe, which was also important because another alien invasion movie, Mars Attacks, was scheduled to come out in August. Beating the movie to the punch was integral to the success of Independence Day. So when Fox made it official that they were releasing during the July 4th weekend of 1996, Mars Attacks had no choice but to move to December, giving the Emmerich movie plenty of breathing room. The film began shooting in the summer of 1995 in New York City. The filmmakers wanted to complete the explosion of the Empire State Building and the ensuing chaos first for two reasons. One, so they could show the cast and execs what the film's biggest set piece would look like, therefore getting them excited for the finished product. And two, so the studio could ramp up the marketing campaign for the film, which would prove to be incredibly important to its success. Much of the rest of the film was shot, well, all over. Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, New Jersey, New York, and California. A massive, sprawling production overall that took approximately 3 months of filming. While Emmerich's A unit shot actors and extras, a huge team of special effects artists toiled away in LA over the elaborate VFX that would bring the film's aliens and their destruction to vivid life. While CGI was in the midst of taking over Hollywood, the ID4 team was determined not to rely too heavily on computer-generated images, money being one factor, of course, but the other concern being that models and practical effects would bring tangible weight to the chaos. Hence, when you see the White House get blown to smithereens, that's an 11-foot wide model that took a month to create and about 3 seconds to blow up. Cameras were set up 10 feet away from the miniature and filming at 300 frames per second to slow down and enhance the power of the image, which certainly became the defining image of the ad campaign later on. When the streets of LA and New York are enveloped by flames after the aliens' massive attack, those are 8-foot wide, 20-foot-long upright miniatures hanging from scaffolding, with flames from a blowtorch going up them while the camera shoots the devastation from above. Of course, CGI would have to come into play during post-production to enhance and complement the practical effects, but a surprising amount of the movie's memorable images, from exploding buildings to fighter jets to the aliens' mothership, were hand-created by talented artists. Speaking of fighter jets, initially the film had the support of the US government, who were willing to lend the filmmakers whatever they needed: equipment, uniforms, vehicles, all during shooting. But upon reading the script, they bristled at the mention of Area 51, which becomes an important location in the movie's second act. The government asked the filmmakers to remove mentions of the infamous base from the script, and when their request was declined, they pulled their support, leaving the filmmakers on their way to unearth the many military props that they needed. Emmerich and Devlin's script is legendarily not exactly the stuff of genius, but they got a lot of assistance from their talented cast, especially Jeff Goldblum, who improvised plenty of his character's dialogue. Apparently, he and Judd Hirsch, who worked with old age makeup to play his father, came up with much of the dialogue during their scenes together. Similarly, Goldblum and Will Smith, who have a small but important amount of screen time together, did plenty of ad-libbing on their own too, but it wasn't always fun for Emmerich. The sequence towards the end, where Smith and Goldblum are in their hijacked alien spacecraft and look with wonder upon the inside of the mothership, took hours upon hours to shoot. Why? Because they wouldn't stop goofing off. Based on an Entertainment Weekly article from '96, that sequence of the duo simply looking out the windshield took 12 hours to film, because they just couldn't keep it together. They had apparently gone stir-crazy in the claustrophobic set. It got so bad that, after the 12 hours, Emmerich decided to stop filming at around midnight so they could just pick up the next day. Oh, I sure wish we had that entire gag reel to watch. Production was completed in the fall of 1995, and then the job of getting the film into shape by July commenced. Not an easy job considering they had approximately 3,000 effect shots to complete, at the time a record in the movie business. Towards the end of post-production, the filmmakers became aware that they needed to add more carnage to the finale, particularly around the destruction of the alien ships, so they asked Fox for some more money to hammer home the deaths of the film's antagonists, which thankfully the studio agreed to. The film's post-production lasted only until a couple of weeks before the movie's release. The question then became, were people going to care about this flick? Will Smith, Bill Pullman, Randy Quaid? Really? Fox's marketing department made it so you couldn't avoid the massiveness of the product. An infamous Super Bowl commercial showing the White House exploding helped catapult the film into the public's consciousness. In fact, it gets credit for being one of the first films to truly capitalize on using the Super Bowl to promote itself. After that ad, everyone suddenly knew what Independence Day was. As July neared, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing an ID4 ad. You have to remember all those billboards and subway ads, right? After a bevy of impressive test screenings, it certainly seemed to be clear that the movie was poised for success. Even Steven Spielberg thought so, going on the record right before its release as saying he pictured it becoming the #1 movie of the year, and guessing it would make anywhere from $250 to $300 million at the box office. And he was pretty damn close. The film ended up making $306 million in North America alone, enjoying another $500 million plus overseas. At the time, it was the second biggest movie ever, next to Spielberg's own Jurassic Park. It went on to win 3 Oscars for visual effects and sound, and ultimately spawned a sequel, which came out 20 years later. Back to Spielberg for a moment. Not long after ID4 came out and blew the roof off of the box office, the director invited Emmerich and Devlin to the set of The Lost World Jurassic Park. He was such a fan of their movie and told the duo that with Independence Day, the pair had reinvented the summer blockbuster, that the business would never be the same afterwards. It's curious to think on those words some 30 years later, and wonder if he was right. To be fair, it surely had a seismic effect on the way movies are advertised, and it might also be safe to say we never looked at visitors from another planet the same way again. And you know what? Cheesy and somewhat dated as it is, it's still an impressive achievement, and a classic blockbuster in every way. And that, my friends, is what the f*** happened to Independence Day.
I'll take care, all right? Nothing but love for you. Nothing but love for you.
Hollywood always seems to latch onto anything that can make it money, which makes it shocking that it took over 40 years for an American Godzilla movie to be produced. After all, Japan had been seeing success with the series since 1956, so why'd it take so long? Well, if anything, we probably wish it had gestated a little bit longer, featuring a Godzilla that didn't even look familiar. If anything, he'd now become a large iguana, and who better to fight him?
Bueller.
Dr. Nico Topodopoulos? It's Topoulos. Whatever.
Oh boy, let's do our best Roger and Ebert impression as we take a look at what happened to Godzilla 98. Despite not getting their first American-produced Godzilla movie until the late 90s, the country had been exposed to the monster for decades. In fact, many films released by Japan's Toho Studios were then given American releases, sometimes with alternate titles. The original Godzilla would be known as
Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
The 70s would introduce American youth to the Hanna-Barbera-produced Godzilla cartoon. But studios took their time deciding to make their own live-action Godzilla movie. Hollywood had their first chance in 1983. Toho gave director Steve Miner, fresh off of making 2 Friday the 13th sequels, permission to shop around his own Godzilla project. It was to be a 3D movie set in the San Francisco area during the Cold War. A screenplay was written by Fred Decker, with storyboards being drawn up. Special effects maestros Rick Baker and David Allen were going to handle the monsters, but no studios wanted to provide the $30 million budget.
I want a bajillion dollars.
A decade passed, then TriStar Pictures bought the rights from Toho in 1992 with the idea of making their own Godzilla trilogy. Toho was in the midst of producing a new era of Godzilla films at the time, but always being conscious of overexposure and not wanting to flood the market with too much Godzilla, put the King of the Monsters on hiatus in Japan, with TriStar's Godzilla looking likely to get a 1996 release. Toho made the Death of Godzilla film, Godzilla vs. Destroya, in 1995. After which, the intention was for Godzilla to go dormant at Toho until the character's 50th anniversary in 2004. A notion that feels totally alien these days. Speed director Jan de Bont was first hired to make TriStar's Godzilla, working from a screenplay by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who had scripted the very underrated Little Monsters together.
You're drinking it? Maurice, it's disgusting.
That script had Godzilla doing battle with the Griffin, an alien creature that rides to Earth on a meteor. It creates a form for itself using DNA gathered by monstrous bats. It ends up having the body of a puma, the wings of a bat, and a tongue composed of snakes. Miner and Decker's Godzilla kept the basics of the kaiju intact, but completely altered his origin. Rather than an ancient creature awoken by a nuclear detonation, this version of Godzilla was the creation of an ancient civilization that spliced dinosaur DNA to create a monster that could fight off an alien force. What people, you ask? The Atlanteans. Long ago, Godzilla thwarted an invasion of DNA-collecting aliens like the Griffin. Then he was kept in stasis in a tank of amniotic fluid for millennia, waiting for the aliens to return. Now he has purpose again, and he fights the hybrid monster to the death in New York City. You can probably guess as to why this one didn't get made. But Stan Winston was actually hired to do the effects for the de Bont film. He designed the Griffin and planned to make Godzilla with a traditional look. Eventually, the cost became too great and eventually killed this version of the hulking monster. TriStar was unwilling to put up the $121 million budget that de Bont had required. So he left and made Twister instead. Director Roland Emmerich and collaborator Dean Devlin were about to have huge success with their film Independence Day, ironically a movie that would go head-to-head against de Bont's Twister that summer. They were known for delivering event films on reasonable budgets, so TriStar offered them the chance to develop their own take on Godzilla. At first, they were hesitant, but they asked production designer Patrick Tatopoulos to draw some concept art and come up with his own design of Godzilla. When they saw what Tatopoulos had envisioned for the monster, they agreed to make the film. Elliott and Rossio received story-by credits on the finished film, but Emmerich and Devlin had completely started over from scratch, and there are no elements of the original screenplay. They assured the studio that they would be able to make the movie for less than $100 million. But then Independence Day was a hit, so TriStar increased the budget that they had to work with. Officially, the final film cost $130 million, more than the price that got the DeBont version shut down. Ironically, there were even some reports claiming that it was actually closer to $150 million. Emmerich and Devlin also reworked Godzilla's origins, but not as drastically as Elliott and Rossio did. They changed the character's roots from dinosaur to iguana. An iguana mutated by the radioactivity of nuclear tests conducted by France in French Polynesia. So let's just call him Iguanzilla. Just like in the original 1954 film, Iguanzilla's presence is first revealed through its destruction of a Japanese fishing boat. The sole survivor claims the boat was destroyed by the mythological sea creature Gojira.
What did you see, old man?
Godzilla. Godzilla.
The creature continues making its way across the globe, approaching the east coast of the United States. After years of attacking Tokyo, the king of all monsters would have his sights set on the Big Apple. They cast Matthew Broderick as the lead, Nick Tatopoulos of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, a character named in honor of the creature designer.
Dr. Nico Topopoulos. It's Tatopoulos.
He's one of the experts brought in by the military to try to figure out what's going on, and is the first to deduce that the creature they're tracking is a mutated aberration, the result of radioactivity. This consulting gig takes him to the rain-soaked city of New York, home of his college girlfriend Audrey Timmons, who ran out on him years ago. Maria Patillo was cast as Audrey, who had been working as an assistant to a creep news reporter played by Harry Shearer, who is best known for his voice work on The Simpsons.
This is certainly no laughing matter.
Audrey hopes to become an on-air personality, aided by cameraman Animal, played by Hank Azaria, also best known for his work on The Simpsons.
Please, Chief Wiggum. I'm Professor Frank, of course. Comic book guy. Cletus the slack-jawed yokel.
She attempts to make the Godzilla situation her big break, which causes some fresh drama between her and Nick. Jean Reno lurks around as a man named Philippe Roche, who is eventually revealed to be a French Secret Service agent.
French Secret Service.
He and his team have a major role in the climactic final sequence, aiming to clean up the mess caused by their country's nuclear tests.
Thank you for your help, my friend.
Also in the ensemble are Kevin Dunn as Military Colonel Hicks, Arabella Field as Audrey's friend and Animal's wife Lucy, Vicki Lewis as paleontologist Elsie Chapman, Michael Lerner as the mayor of New York City, Ebert, paired with Laurie Goldman as his aide Gene. These characters were Emmerich and Devlin's way of thumbing their nose at movie critics Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel for giving their films negative reviews over the years. Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart Simpson, even shows up for a cameo. Holy hell, there's a lot of Simpsons present here.
Ay, caramba!
There are a lot of characters, but they don't slow down the monster action much. Godzilla makes landfall in New York just 25 minutes into the film, and impressively, Emmerich actually holds off on showing a full shot of him. There are only quick glimpses of body parts, and he is clearly massive. This version of Godzilla, brought to the screen through animatronics and CGI, is about 200 feet tall and over 300 feet long, making him taller than the original Godzilla, but smaller than the Godzilla of the 80s and 90s Toho films. 45 minutes in, we get our first look at the Patrick Tatopoulos design. It strayed too far from classic Godzilla for many, but Toho signed off on the changes, feeling the spirit of Godzilla was retained. The look is very different, but there are recognizable elements in there. And when the military pisses the monster off, it demonstrates its fiery breath. Godzilla has always had the ability to blast things with his radioactive breath, But Emmerich and Devlin wanted a change. They wanted logic applied to the fire breathing, with the gases inside reacting to a flame and causing the fiery spectacle, versus simply a limitless supply of destruction and chaos. When watching Godzilla 98, it becomes very clear that the filmmakers were inspired by one film in particular, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. In that film, it's revealed that the dinosaurs can actually reproduce asexually due to the frog DNA that was used to create them.
We used the complete DNA of a frog to fill in the holes and complete the code.
It also features a fantastic stalking sequence between the velociraptors and the young children. So what was the solution here? Well, let's slap that asexual reproduction onto our big Iguanzilla and make his sole purpose for coming to NYC to nest.
How can he be pregnant? Doesn't he need a mate?
Not if he reproduces asexually.
Where's the fun in that?
That's right. He sees this little island where he's being chased by helicopters, torpedoed by submarines, attacked by missiles, and goes, perfect place to raise my little Iguanzillas. Speaking of which, we've got a bunch of baby Godzillas and they behave exactly like velociraptors. I get it, they're really freaking cool, but did we really need them here? We already have a massive version of them. The tiny ones just feel unnecessary. At least they're able to be ahead of their time, with a fun tease for a Godzilla sequel that would never come to fruition. Emmerich and Devlin took the concept of Godzilla and delivered a fun, dopey creature feature, with a lighthearted tone and plenty of destructive entertainment. The problem is, the monster just isn't Godzilla. The new design was kept hidden in the marketing, partly because the effects weren't ready to be shown in trailers, so only parts of Godzilla were shown. There was a scene specifically shot for a teaser that shows Godzilla's foot smashing a T-Rex skeleton in a museum, letting viewers know that he's much bigger than something we'd see in Jurassic Park. The tagline was, "Size does matter."
It's Godzilla!
But when viewers saw that this wasn't a Godzilla that they recognized, they were disappointed. The monster earned the nickname Geno, which stands for Godzilla in name only.
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not. Still, we should run like it is Godzilla! Though it isn't.
Though despite it being a mouthful, I'm clearly a fan of the name Iguanzilla. Despite all of this, Godzilla 98 was still a box office success, earning $379 million worldwide. TriStar was ready to go ahead with a sequel, with Tab Murphy writing a treatment that would follow the last surviving Godzilla offspring, being raised by a family in the Australian outback. That is, until its peace is interrupted by a military task force and monstrous insects that were also the result of the French nuclear tests, leading to a battle between Godzilla and the insect queen. But it didn't get made. TriStar knew Godzilla's reception had not been very enthusiastic, so they set aside their plans to make a trilogy, and Toho quickly resumed their franchise, starting up a new series of Godzilla movies in 1999. While we never received a live-action sequel, there was an animated series follow-up that ran for 2 seasons. It followed Nick Tatopoulos, the Godzilla offspring, and several other characters from the film on adventures around the world. And honestly, it was a pretty good show, with even people who disliked the 98 movie giving it praise.
I had this skunk from the eggs all over me. The creature must have picked up on that scent and imprinted on me, like a baby with a parent.
And in 2004, for their 50th anniversary film, Godzilla Final Wars, Toho brought the American Godzilla back in live action. He's given the name Zilla, and he appears just long enough to be destroyed by the original Godzilla, which is just about the most fitting ending you could have to this story. R.I.P. Iguanzilla, we hardly knew ye. We all know that Roland Emmerich has a complicated relationship with the planet Earth.
Welcome to Earth.
In that he enjoys seeing it smashed to pieces. But it's those very same Earthlings that he's killing who pay good money for the opportunity to see him do so.
You no good damn.
In 1996, he leveled several US landmarks in Independence Day. 2 years later, he sent Godzilla to stomp all over the buildings and citizens of New York City, as well as the souls of those in the theater.
Dwight, you're a kiss ass. Boom, roasted.
In 2004, he ushered in a new ice age, complete with tornadoes and tidal waves in The Day After Tomorrow. At the time, it seemed that Emmerich had done as much world-destroying as he could possibly manage. And the director was ready to move on to other things, starting with the prehistoric adventure film 10,000 BC. But the extinction of mankind has always proved too tempting a spectacle for Emmerich to move on from. So in 2008, the director embarked on what he thought would be the ultimate end-of-the-world movie. And he might have been right about that. Hope you've got all your doomsday prepping sorted out, because we're going to find out just what happened to 2012.
This is wild. This is really wild.
Emmerich truly did not have plans to do another end-of-the-world disaster movie, but when he discovered the 2012 phenomena, he found it hard to resist.
Only one way, and that's my way. Grim Reaper calling, Judgment Day.
You'll remember back then that there were plenty of websites and books dedicated to the idea that the world was going to end in December of 2012.
The world, as we know it, will soon come to an end.
Based on various interpretations of the Mayan calendar, most of which, proved to be incorrect. Nevertheless, in the years before the actual year 2012, there existed a subset of people who genuinely believed that the Earth would undergo some kind of cataclysmic change simply when the last calendar page flipped. Emmerich became fascinated by the concept, and ironically had always wanted to make a biblical flood movie. Teaming with his Day After Tomorrow and 10,000 BC co-writer Harold Closer, Emmerich embarked on telling a story that pitted a global catastrophe against a ragtag group of humans who hoped to survive certain doom. The story would lean into the moral and political implications of who would live and who would die in such an event if the world's governments were already prepared for it. Unconcerned with what the film's budget would ultimately be, Emmerich and Closer wrote the script without caring if it was doable or not. They simply wrote every wild, ridiculous set piece that they could think of. They knew that it would be an expensive endeavor, but they also knew that there's a market for such a genre. After all, Independence Day made over $800 million worldwide, and Day After Tomorrow made over $500 million.
That's a lot of money.
Once they were finished with the script, in February of 2008, the duo set up a bidding war amongst the studios, something Emmerich had done with his 2 prior disaster flicks. His process was to let the studio heads read the script and then meet with him in order for both parties to agree on the budget, overall vision, and release strategy for the film. All of the major studios were interested, though some shuddered at the sizable budget. But ultimately Sony, who distributed Emmerich's Godzilla and The Patriot, walked away with the grand prize, committing to a price tag of $200 million. Sony gave 2012 a tentative release date of summer 2009. When it came to casting, Emmerich knew that he wouldn't have to cast A-listers in the lead roles because, as he put it, the movie's the star.
So smile!
Besides, with a $200 million budget, most of that money was going to go towards the enormous amount of visual effects that it would take to sell a convincing Armageddon.
Wake me up before you go, leave me hanging on like a yo-yo.
So for the main protagonist, author-turned-limo driver Jackson Curtis,
It's okay! I'm a limo driver!
Emmerich cast John Cusack, not exactly someone that was known for participating in big-budget spectacles, but appropriate here thanks to his everyman quality.
That's great! Open the goddamn door!
As Adrian, a chief science officer who wrestles with telling the public about the upcoming catastrophe, Emmerich cast Chiwetel Ejiofor after seeing him in his breakout role in Dirty Pretty Things. As an eccentric conspiracy theorist who proves to be right, Woody Harrelson came on board and was allowed to improvise some of his character's more quirky moments.
They said unstable? Unstable.
Emmerich is on the record as saying that Woody demanded that his character's butt crack be visible, which seems like a request that only Woody Harrelson could come up with. I assume there was also plenty of weed on his flyer. Emmerich filled the rest of the cast with reliable character actors, although there was a major change dictated by the political landscape in the US at the time. In the original screenplay, the President of the United States was a woman, modeled after presumptive nominee Hillary Clinton. But when Barack Obama won the 2008 Democratic primary, the character was rewritten to be an African-American man, and Danny Glover was cast.
I'm too old for this shit.
Emmerich would later boast that he was able to assemble a talented ensemble such as this thanks to a quote-unquote really good script. At the time, he admitted that the screenplay for 10,000 BC was a good script at first, but got worse thanks to several compromises that he had to make on it. This time, he promised himself no compromises, that the script that he and Closer wrote would be the one that they would make. Of course, in addition to the cast, the main stars of the film would be the various sequences of mind-boggling devastation that befalls the Earth. With that comes the necessary destruction of several noteworthy landmarks and icons. This time, however, Emmerich intentionally focused on famous religious symbols getting smashed to bits. Such as the Christ the Redeemer statue in Brazil and St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. It was Emmerich's contention that it was important for the film's impact if these symbols of faith were destroyed, but not the faith of our protagonists. Emmerich is noted for being anti-organized religion, so this was in keeping with his personal beliefs. That said, he had to pull his punches with one iconic location: Al-Kaaba, the stone structure at the center of the Grand Mosque in Mecca, considered the most important shrine in Islam. Emmerich had planned on destroying the Kaaba as well, but his co-writer Closer advised against it, fearing that the startling image would offend Muslims around the world and prompt a fatwa against the filmmaker.
You got a fucking fatwa! I got a fatwa! You got a fatwa!
After some consideration, Emmerich agreed that it was probably best to avoid risking his life over a disaster movie and scrubbed that particular scene. Of course, other sites were still up for grabs, like the White House, which Emmerich famously blew to smithereens in ID4. While not wanting to repeat himself, Emmerich didn't want the audience to think that he would hesitate to crush one of the world's most iconic buildings once again.
What are the odds?
So he came up with an even more intense way of doing so, by tossing the USS John F. Kennedy at it with the help of a gigantic tidal wave. While most of the visual effects would come courtesy of computer magic, Emmerich relied on practical effects as well to stage his chaos. Whole city blocks built on gimbals were created in order to shake the actors around while they ran here and there, while real cars were tossed down from cables during some of the death-defying escape scenes. Production even created a lava cannon, which would hurl flaming balls at the road during the film's volcanic eruption scene. But that proved to be a little too impractical, not to mention dangerous. Despite how large and expensive the movie was, Emmerich wasn't fazed, saying later that because he'd made several disaster films already, he was very prepared for the making of this epic. And the production was a fairly smooth one, with the majority of the film being shot in Vancouver because of Canadian tax breaks. Shooting on 2012 began in July 2008 and lasted until October of that year. Originally, it had locked down a July 10, 2009 release date, but Sony decided to move it to November 13th in order to maximize its potential, considering the lack of competition from mega-budget action movies that time of the year.
What are you waiting for?
The move also allowed the studio to complete the hefty amount of visual effects work that it took to complete the film. The movie's shifted release date paid off as it turned out, and 2012 opened to a very encouraging $65 million in the States and a whopping $160 million internationally. making it the 4th largest worldwide opening weekend at the time for Sony. And critics were not kind to it, but a filmmaker like Emmerich, and by extension the studio, could not care less about that. Neither did the audience, as the movie wound up making almost $800 million worldwide, more than justifying its big price tag.
Hey, have a safe trip, you little bastards.
The movie suffered some minor controversy before it came out. A viral marketing site called the Institute for Human Continuity popped up before the film's release, and allowed people to register for a lottery that could win them a spot on one of the arcs that sail away at the end of the film with the survivors aboard. The website also offered survival kits and advice for where it claimed were the cataclysmic forces that would destroy Earth in 2012. You could see posters and billboards for the so-called IHC scattered throughout certain cities. There was also a site supposedly run by the Woody Harrelson character who was claiming the world was going to end and no one would survive. Naturally, this alarmed people who stumbled upon these sites, not knowing that they were promoting a big sci-fi tentpole film. One organization in particular was not amused: NASA. An astronomer at the agency stated that he received hundreds of panicked emails asking if NASA had any information about this potential event. And he subsequently warned Sony that some people were taking it way too seriously. He even claimed people were telling him that they were suicidal at the thought of the world ending. For its part, Sony argued that their logo, albeit it's small and at the bottom of the page, made it clear that the site was linked to a fictional movie. Believe it or not, 2012 almost spawned a sequel, which makes sense considering it ends with the perfect setup for the continuing adventures of those who survived the mayhem. Emmerich announced the TV show while doing the press rounds for 2012, but soon after the movie's release, it was revealed that the show was not moving forward. Emmerich claimed that the show, naturally titled 2013, was going to follow the arcs as they arrived in Africa to a hostile nation that was supremely pissed off that it wasn't invited to join the rest of humanity on the super ships. Emmerich said at the time that it was going to be a very political show, and the people he was pitching to were either uncomfortable with the story direction, nor the size of the budget. Hence, it was shut down for good. While that TV show could have been interesting for a number of reasons, at least we still have the kinetic madness of 2012. Perhaps Emmerich's best disaster film, which throws logic to the wind and focuses on ridiculous, thrilling action. Say what you will about the man's filmography, but he knows how to destroy a continent or two, and 2012 is almost certainly the high point of his career. And that, my friends, is what happened to 2012. Ah, take me back. What were some of your favorite forays into the disaster genre? Is Roland Emmerich just the king that cannot be touched? Will we ever get back to having disaster movies be a big deal again? Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.